Cut Deep is a multi-platform show covering social and political issues across the Virgin Islands. Its viewership continues to grow, reaching some 6,000 to 10,000 viewers weekly. It cuts across demographics and captures an international audience. Of course, we cannot bring these issues forward without your generous support. For advertising opportunity, please call or WhatsApp 284-440-3234. Supporters may also donate to Cut Deep and the issues it supports through our ATH Mobile 284-440-3234. Donations will be kept confidential. Send words of encouragement, comments, leads, and social concerns. We say thank you to our donors thus far this season. Thank you to our viewing audience and supporters for watching and sharing our content. Cut Deep airs every Tuesday at 8 p.m. live via our Facebook, YouTube channel, and 90.9 FM. Tonight we're covering the Constitutional Review Report, and we're absolutely delighted to have Mrs. Lisa Penn-Lettsome and Mrs. Maya Barry join us from the Commission. We're also happy to have Bishop Klein join us on this panel. I only had to ask him, he was ready and willing. Pre-conversation, we're ready to go. Thank you, Bishop, for being here. A review of our Constitution is late by probably a decade or more. So being at this point where we've been able to complete the review stage is most welcoming. Now ensuring a Constitution for the people and by the people is our end goal. An end document that will see good governance ushered in, which includes transparency across all facets of government, and that would usher in modern governance for the Virgin Islands. We will take a brief break and get ready to move the conversation forward. Tonight, we're going to be breaking down the Constitutional Review Report. We're going to be getting inside of it. I want you guys to share the live on Facebook and also tune in to 90.9. They're airing this live as well. I want to ask our guests if they can just introduce themselves and maybe just tell us their role on the Commission, the Constitutional Review Commission.
Thank you, Cindy. I'm very happy to be here. My name is Lisa Penn-Lettsome, and I've been appointed as chairman of the Constitutional Review Commission. And so my role as such isn't just to chair meetings and to have the consultations, but I've actually been running the commission itself and heading it up. So once a report was submitted, all the other commissioners, their role came to an end. But as commissioner, there are some additional duties, so I'm such as this, and I'm staying on and being assisted by some of them as well from time to time with things that need to be done. But we're very happy for this opportunity to be able to promote our report because we would like to encourage persons to read it and get familiar with it.
Thank you.
Hi Cindy, I am Maya Barry. I've known you for a very long time and I know you know me well, but certainly, you know, for the listening audience and the viewing audience, I am Principal Crown Counsel in the Attorney General's Office and also a member of the Commission, and my role on the Commission has been really to support Lisa and to, you know, just generally go around to the public and find out the views and wishes of the people of the Virgin Islands and, you know, determine what it is they want for their future going forward.
Well, I'm no stranger to camera and radio and media, social media. I am Bishop John Klein. I would like to think of myself first as a pastor, a religious leader, and then a political and social activist. I believe in speaking up for the good of the people of these Virgin Islands, and I believe in just seeking good governance for these Virgin Islands so that our standard of living and quality of life can be enjoyed.
Thank you, John. If you guys, and I just want to indicate really quickly that you can send your comments on the Facebook Live and we will take your questions and comments as we go along. So it's really gonna be an open conversation. conversation. I'm going to let you guys lead the way. I do have questions. I'm sure John has questions. But it's really about having you guys explain, if you can explain the process.
Yes.
Dive into what that looked like for us and some of the most challenging or vexing issues that people wanted addressed.
Okay, so I'm happy to kick that off. So if I may just be permitted to go back a little, constitutions, we have a written constitution. So constitutions are, they're live documents, and you don't have one and that's the end of it. The intention is that they would be periodically reviewed. In some countries, constitutions are modified by court judgments, but in our case, it's a bit different because we have a written constitution with a lot of specific guidelines and issues and standards that need to be adhered to. Now, to be able to be more flexible, you should review those and see that they're fit for purpose. And that was our main term of reference, to review the Constitution and assess whether or not it's still fit for purpose, and if not, the gaps that need to be bridged. We were given some specific items that we needed to look into, such as, you know, just to give a few, whether there should be a regime for election expenses, the next steps to self-determination. That was one of the substantive issues. But in terms of sub-issues, we were asked, for example, should there be a regime for election expenses? Should statutory boards be elevated to the point where they're in the Constitution? What should be the correct relationship between ministers and the public service and ministers and governor? And other things such as transparency, how do we improve good governance? But those are really things that we were asked to be sure that we address, but our overall mandate was to review the entire Constitution, determine whether it's a good fit, next steps towards self-determination, and we also had one additional substantive term, which was to do with law enforcement agencies and how they can fit into the Constitution. So we had a number of consultative sessions, is what we prefer to call them, because we began each session as an educational session, and then we allowed people to comment, and conversation developed, and it became then we were able to glean their views, so it became a consultative session in the end, but they tended to begin as an educational session. So we had 45 of those. We allowed persons to contact us privately, so we had more private meetings actually than public town hall meetings. They were very, very popular. Now, in social media, we had over 19,000 views in social media. We did a few interviews, and we reached out to the secondary schools. 2 responded, and also some civic organizations we reached out to. So we made ourselves available. Private families, you know, we were approached by everyone. And of course, the USVI.
Everybody was involved in this process, right?
Everyone was involved.
It wasn't just about Virgin Islanders and belongers.
No, and everyone was involved. And we actually had a special event because persons expressed a preference for the public town hall meetings not to be covered in certain ways by the media. And so we did a signature event at the college, which was seemed to be more popular on Facebook and social media than in person, which sort of defeated the purpose, because, you know, that is what made the meetings interactive when people in person came. But it's there, it's still there for people to go back and look at. So we conducted that process. Once we were finished with the consultation, we then collated the comments that we received. We received about 460 individual submissions But in terms of individual comments, it would be closer to more like 1,000 because people didn't address, a submission would address more than one comment. And we ended up then with, we compiled a list of those comments so we wouldn't lose sight of them. And that led, of course, to our report, which we presented at the end of November. Now, I would just like to say our report is a little bit different in that we didn't just give a little snippet and our recommendations. We actually left a great deal of our research in there. And the reason for doing that is because one of the recurring themes, in fact, one of the top 5 recurring themes, it was the number 3 recurring theme, I think, was lack of education on the Constitution. So we deliberately left our report as an educational tool. We thought that that would have been appreciated, and a number of people have said that much. Our report does contain 57 recommendations, but we encourage persons to not just read the recommendations, but to actually read the articles that go with each recommendation so that they can understand. If they don't agree, but they will at least understand why we landed where we landed. So the next steps after this is we would encourage, of course, that the report be debated in the House of Assembly, and the Premier should at some point set up a negotiating team. They may or may not agree with all of these recommendations, but it is their role, supported by myself as the chairman, to then decide, well, if they don't like our particular recommendation, if they would prefer to modify it, they can come up with options, but they have to be prepared when they go to the actual meetings where they will be negotiating for whatever it is they would like. So these are just recommendations, and that is how the process works.
Right, so this
here.
negotiating team you're speaking of is to what?
So that is
Go to the UK?
that is the
Right.
team which will negotiate the Constitution. So the Premier is free. It is his team that he will set up and to support him and to guide him. The role of the ex officio persons such as myself, who would be expected to be on that team, is not to be around the table and agitating or getting into disagreements with them. It is to guide them and to assist if they wanted to change something. And that is why we left the report like this. So at least they would be able to say, okay, I understand the reasoning, but perhaps they could have given a little bit more thought to this angle. And since that angle may not be reflected in here, they're free at the negotiating stage in
To
their
edit.
team to then promote that angle. And it is not for me at that point to
Right.
get in the way of that.
Based on all of your research, would you say this is a fair report based on the public's input?
The report is 100% reflective of what came out of public consultation.
Okay, so my next question and concern when I'm asking what the process is next, as we know that it goes to the House of Assembly for debate and conversation, are they allowed to actually take things out? What is the process like? How does that work?
The debate is just to highlight it and to bring attention really to it, but a debate is not meant to take anything out. That would be the negotiating team who would be able to say, we don't like this recommendation, and so we're not going to put that one forward. But that is for the team, that is not for the debate.
Right. So I don't know if you understand where I'm going with this, because
Well, I understand.
That's why
I think I
asked.
understand
Yeah.
where you're going with it. I think, however, what I hear Lisa saying is once the team is put together, that team now must come to some settlement as to these are the things that we're going to the UK to present as to what we want in a new constitution.
Right.
And some things may make it, and some may not.
So that's
but
why-
in the House of Assembly,
Right.
it's not for them to decide
So
there.
that's where my problem comes in, because that's why I asked how accurate this is based on your interaction in the meetings and everything with the public, how accurate this is in terms of what we want as a people. So now we're saying that not even the people that we've elected at the polls that we should have our best interest, this may be left to others to decide which parts of it stay in.
I think what I hear is hopefully, the people that will be selected for this negotiating team will be like a microcosm of the general population, and hopefully will accurately, at least almost, represent the views of the people
Right.
based on what they read from the document.
Right.
So what has been left in, the negotiating team would know how was this particular recommendation, how was it arrived at? Am I correct in saying that? And based on that, then they can determine, I guess, make some judgment.
Right.
Should this be one of the priorities going into this negotiation? What are the possibilities of the UK pushing back on it? Should we just take
Right.
everything,
Right.
what have you?
One of the things I'm advocating for, because you know I have a big mouth, and I carry the opinion and position of quite a few people. So one of the things I think, because with this, we're trying to move into a new space of governance and transparency and really what the people actually want as opposed to what, they might say we should have, because we feel it on the ground every single day, whether it's that a minister or a rep can be recalled or whatever. Like, those are things that we know that we need, and I'm sure that was overwhelming in your report. So what I'm advocating for, and we're going to get to some more questions, but one of the big things in terms of this I'm advocating for is that the people are involved in every step of the way. So if indeed this negotiating team did take out some stuff, can the people see like a final report before it goes to the UK to see exactly what's going to the UK? Is that something that can happen?
That would be very unusual.
Right, but we're in unusual times. And I think that we need to maybe do these things so that at the end, the people are more involved and we understand what's going on, and that we don't assume, like, some of us may actually think like this made it there, right? And then the UK is going to take out some stuff as well. And I'm advocating that the people see what our document is going to the UK, so that we know that it represents us, but also that we know what the UK takes out, and if that's in our best interest or their best interest. That's kind of where I'm going with it, what I'm advocating for, and what I would like to see the process being. After all of this work, at least, it should reflect the people.
I understand what you're saying. I don't know how the process will pan out this time around because, as you said, these are unusual times. But it may be helpful to know that in the last exercise, the negotiation, actually, all of this took place over 2 months.
Okay.
The meeting, one here.
This
with
was
the
what,
UK,
2007?
2006 that led to the 2007.
Right.
Yes, so it was one meeting here, one meeting in the UK. The
Back
constitution
again.
was drafted, a review was sent for final input to make sure it reflected what was in the meeting, and that's it.
We were happy then.
That was it.
We were more happy then.
But the point is, it's not as inclusive and probably long-winded as you might be thinking it is. It really happens very quickly.
Well, I'm saying, and it doesn't even have to be long-winded, I'm just saying maybe the people need to be more involved to make sure that what we really want is what we get, and that by the time they sign off with this new constitution, we're still facing the same things, and then we feel so disenfranchised that why did we even go through this process?
Well, I am of the view that in the end, we have to trust a team.
Yeah, I'm open
And
to
we
that.
have to trust them with the capacity to
It's
negotiate
called
on our behalf.
representative democracy.
Okay.
Voted them in to represent them.
All right. And I'm hoping that, I'm hoping it's not just politicians on the team. That's what I'm hoping. Anyhow, but
Based on the last couple or one,
that's what happened.
it's a mixture.
It's a mixture.
It's a mixture.
Okay,
You
a
do
private
have,
citizen.
You do have one or two private citizens. They can take someone else from the CRC as well, other
Okay.
than the chairman.
And that's what I'm hoping, and that they will represent us in a fair and equitable way based on the document.
Yeah.
What I wanted to, if I can, Cindy, one of the questions that loomed heavy during this discussion and continues to bother, I think, many of us, that came out in the Constitution, and I don't know what recommendation it is in your book, and maybe you can help me, is the powers of the governor. It
Get straight to
continues
that.
to be, I think, a great concern for many persons, because as far as I understand it, during the consultation from the team,
Yes.
that it is almost like the governor has absolute power at the end of the day, if he wants to have it. What does this document and these recommendations do to address that?
So the report does spend a couple of chapters or a couple of sections on the governor's powers. One of the main things that we recommended was for the abolition of what's section called an ouster clause in the Constitution. It's section 40, ouster clause. It's section 40, subsection 6 in the Constitution. So what that does is there are certain parts of the Constitution that requires the governor to consult or to take advice, to do certain things only after he has consulted or taken advice in general. And section 46 says whether or not he actually consulted, for example, the courts cannot inquire into that. That is put beyond the realm of the court. And that was something that I must say the more academically inclined members of the public, because that is something that is really hard to find in there unless you read and delve into it. It's not as if there's a headline clause, but I was surprised that people did pick it up. There were people who read the Constitution during this exercise, and that was very outstanding for a number of them. And it did come up, and we recommended that it be taken out. I don't see why that would be controversial, because it has been taken out in constitutions in other overseas territories.
Such as?
The Cayman Islands, it's
Okay.
taken out from there. So it should be able to be taken out from ours. And in fact, the very same persons who draft the constitutions of these overseas territories and other experts feel that it is actually a power that goes back to an old convention called prerogative powers that is now not relevant in this day and not relevant in this context, and that is a misunderstanding in the modern day of a convention that was old and doesn't apply in the constitution of overseas territories. It might still apply in some other constitutional arrangements, but not in ours. So I feel that that is one that would come out. One of the other recommendations is, we all know that the governor has the power to take some things from the consolidated fund, for example. And there isn't, although I'm told that there's consultation in practice, and that would make sense. You don't just get up and do it. But actually, interestingly, the Constitution does not have a specific requirement for consultation. So it's a small recommendation. It might be just optics because it's already done in practice, but we have also recommended that the words following consultation be
No, I think it's
inserted.
important to put it in because you only have to get a governor who knows the power he has, and then he just does it. You know, you may have considerate ones who want to work along with your elected officials, but then you might get one who is more dictatorial in his approach of governing. And so I think
This creates a
it's
problem.
necessary, creates a problem. What
In
about,
terms of the wider relationship with the UK, I think Maya might want to address that,
Okay.
that part of it.
Before
something
you
called
go
the
there.
Sewell Convention.
in terms of the same governor, it is my understanding that the governor can introduce a bill in the House of Assembly and probably assent to it or something,
Yes, he can
has
do
the
both.
power to make law.
laws.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So it might be, I think Maya could probably address this because it's probably tied up with that. Essentially, what we've said is, okay, he has this power. It's, what it says is if the House of Assembly fails to pass a motion or fails to pass a bill on something that is related to international relations, it's not on everything. It has to
Okay,
be
it's
just,
not on
it's
everything.
just on international relations for
Okay.
us.
Oh.
Yes. Then,
And security or just international?
no,
relations?
just international relations.
Like human
Yes,
rights.
yes, or beneficial ownership,
Or-
yes, or same sex.
well, they
Yes.
they
So
put that
they
under
would say-
human rights.
They would say all of those are
Okay.
international obligations that the UK has to comply with. So Maya will explain it
Okay.
better, but what we've said there is if you're going to do these things, then at least tell us ahead of time, you know. But I'll let her explain.
But it
that.
wasn't taken out.
No.
And what the reason for that is?
I mean, if the negotiating team wants to try and ask for that to be modified in some way, we didn't find any precedent for it being modified other than sort of prior consultation. It already has quite an extensive process. So for example, a similar provision exists in Cayman. And what happened there with their same-sex law that they tried to pass, it just failed to pass by a slim number, just a handful. And that was sufficient for the governor there to use that Section 81 power to then pass their civil partnership, well, make their civil partnership law law.
Do you think it would have gone differently if the margin was not slim?
That depends, I guess, on politics and your relationship. It probably would have been something not constitutional then, but political, because constitutionally it doesn't matter. And it would have then become whether, you know, people were so overwhelmingly against it, whether it would be right for the UK to still allow the governor to use his powers. But that would
Right.
be a political matter
Not
as opposed to a constitutional matter.
Right. And I believe that to be the case
Yes.
because it was very slim. It was very slim.
I don't know if you
It
want
was,
to-
it was.
Cayman is very different to here.
No, it was very slim, but we have to understand that it still was tied to the international obligations. And what the European Convention on Human Rights has said is while they've never held that there had been an obligation for same-sex marriage, there has been held under Article 8, which is the right to private and family life, that there must be some regime that gives an equivalent, so some recognition, legal recognition to same-sex partnerships. And the way that states have gone about doing that in Europe and elsewhere where the convention would apply could differ. What they tried to do in the Cayman Islands was to come up with the civil partnership, and that didn't pass the House, and it did fail by a very slim margin, and the governor used the similar powers that we have in Section 81, I think it's there, Section 80, but it's very similar to the power that our governor has in 81, and he passed it, he made it law. So it is a situation where, at the end of the day, the duly elected legislature has decided by a majority not to pass legislation, but the UK representative that's sitting in the overseas territory, in that case the Cayman Islands, was able to make it law. And we do know that, you know, you didn't need necessarily the governor to be able to do it, because under Section 119 of our Constitution, the UK can, you know, pass laws for the peace, order, and good governance of the overseas territory. And we saw that happen in 2018 with the sanctions and anti-money laundering legislation that made mandatory public registers of beneficial ownership. Of course, you know, that still, in the way that it was introduced, you know, it's still subject to orders in council and things like that, and we're still going through that process. But the point is, it's not the first time that the UK has actually made legislation applicable to any of the overseas territories. And Cindy, you and I would have been in high school when the death penalty, for instance, was abolished. So we know that, you know, it is a power that they have, and they have exercised it in the past, and as recent as 2018. What we are saying, and this now would segue into the recommendations that we have made now in relation to, and Lisa would have mentioned the Sewell Convention. So it's a convention that the Westminster Parliament, the Parliament in London, has with their devolved legislatures. That convention...
That's
Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland. So that convention applies to those devolved legislatures. And what Westminster has said is that we will consult with you and ascertain your views prior to enacting legislation and making it applicable to you, or enacting legislation for and on your behalf, or making it applicable to you. So that is essentially what the convention is. And what we are advocating for in the new constitution is that a similar convention should be applicable to the Virgin Islands. And it is something that I know that I don't think that we will have a lot of opposition to. I know that there has been dialogue between the United Kingdom government and the local government on this, and certainly at least one overseas territory, being the Cayman Islands, was in 2020 able to have, or 2020, 2021, able to have an amendment where you would have to consult with the Premier and have the Cabinet in the local government signify their views on any legislation. And of course, you know, that, of course, having the obligation to ascertain the views of the locally elected government, of course, they can still do what they want, but you never know. Your views may make them change course, they may take it, we may be able to persuade them, but it is certainly an improvement from what we have now, because there is now no obligation to consult, there is no obligation to take our views into account. So certainly that is a step forward.
That's advancement.
It is advancement. And certainly we hope it will be an uncontroversial one, given that at least one other overseas territory was able to have that, and certainly recent dialogue suggests that that may be the way that the wind is blowing.
Yeah, as opposed to trying to go into Section 81 itself and tinker with it. But on Section 81, that's what's called discretionary power. So you're familiar with all the reviews that were done coming out of COI, and one of the reviews was on discretionary powers. So Section 81 is an example of a governor's discretionary power. So our only recommendation for 81 was, okay, it's your discretionary power, but consult with the Premier.
And I would add, though, that, you know, coupled with the recommendation that the ouster clause that Lisa would have mentioned is in Section 46, you know, we are hoping that we will have meaningful consultation, because at least we will be able to use the process of judicial review to question whether or not the governor actually consulted, or whether or not the consultation was meaningful or reasonable with all the applicable principles of judicial review. And I know that the listening audience might not know that, but that is is the process by which the courts exercise their supervisory jurisdiction over the exercise of executive powers. So that would be a significant advancement, that we can actually check, did you consult, and was the consultation, you know, meaningful, or was it reasonable, and all of that. So that is itself an advancement. So when you couple it now with, you know, the requirement to consult in 81, which is the discretionary power to enact legislation, or the requirement to consult before you take money out of the consolidated fund, those things, we are hopeful that those instances and requirements for consultation would definitely, you know, move the needle forward in terms of reducing the ability of the governor or the UK to do things in a very arbitrary manner. Not saying that it happens now, but definitely saying that we would want to guard against it happening in the future.
And where did we come down while we're on discretionary power? Where did we come down on, you know, at the minister's discretion?
I think the report, we didn't make any recommendation in that regard, because the independent reviewer for that topic would have dealt with that in full. And I don't think that there are many powers under the Constitution that's within the minister's discretion.
That's more legislation?
It's more in the individual. I stand to be corrected, but
Yeah,
I think
know
it's in more in individual pieces of legislation. Yes.
Okay, 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 understood.
Can I ask, what I was going to ask? In terms of the Constitution, is there any, was there any recommendation made as it relates to, God, it's just fog. It's gonna come back. Let's move on.
All right.
I hope it comes back.
So I guess what I want to know is, what was the biggest issue topic? Like, what was,
yes,
you
so
know?
so the I think the top, if I can remember them off the top of my head, the top 8 or so. Number 1 was to review the at-large system.
Okay.
That was
yes.
the number 1. We heard that everywhere we went. It's not working, and we put some things in there for discussion. Whether or not we got it right is still up for debate, but that's the purpose of the report. The number 2 recurring theme was lack of transparency and public consultation. And I think number 3 was the need for more education.
Okay.
And then the others were things like people wanted to vote for the premier directly. That was one of the top ones. And
I would love to see that.
and also just generally education and self-determination. And I can't remember what the others were, but those were the top ones. We did not put emphasis on them other than when they really stood out, we mentioned them in the report, because we do have gems in here that were inspired by a comment that was probably the only comment, but it was a good one and it made it to the report. So it's not necessarily...
What was that comment?
There were comments, there were a lot of comments that were only single comments, yes,
Okay.
that only came up once. So
Okay.
for instance, we had a comment which came in late actually, that persons who have to do annual reports under the statutes, you know, there should be some mechanism under the Constitution to hold your feet to the fire. And that made it to the report,
Okay.
for example.
All right, so are you saying then that, you know, the suggestions of, you know, voting for premier, that has not made it into the review?
That's made it in. What we want to explain there is that what persons wanted were to be given a ballot paper that said John Doe Premier, Jane Doe Deputy Premier, and, you know, perhaps list 5 people who are running for Premier and 5 running for Deputy Premier, and to be able to vote for those specific offices. and that's what you call direct voting. That is a unique feature of the characteristic of a presidential system, whereas we have a parliamentary system. And we weren't comfortable with taking a concept from a different model. I know we have the at-large, and that's not part of the Westminster, but the way I put it is, whilst the at-large may have been a little dent on the Westminster system, to have direct voting for your premier would have been an assault on the Westminster system. So it would have just turned the Constitution upside down. You were trying to take something from a different model that's not meant for the Constitution you have, and it wouldn't have the checks and balances and other things to go with it. So you would have had to have 2 sets of elections, for example. Yeah, you would have to have an election for your premier and deputy premier, and then a general election for everybody else. So I think yes, because if you think about it, if you're thinking about them, you're given a ballot with, when you go for general election with specific names, what would happen, for example, if I were to contest as premier and I weren't successful, and this is in the same election as everybody else, it means then that I don't get the chance to then run for another ordinary office if I lost as premier.
Yeah, but
I would have
that would have been your choice.
But
so
it
you would have
would
had a choice whether you wanted to run just generally, or you want to throw your hat in the ring for.
So you're saying traditionally
office
that's
of
how it's
premier?
done in that type of a
No,
system?
I was saying that I was preempting that that's what you were going to come back with.
Oh.
Because I was saying, what we're saying is you would need 2 separate elections.
Well,
But
I
you
mean,
wouldn't.
But yes, how else would you be able to do it? How else would you be able to have direct voting to be given a ballot that says premier and deputy premier?
Yeah, I mean, to me, if you enter the elections and we're voting for district reps, we're voting for premier, etc. All of these things are on there. Maybe you have the ability to, I see we were talking about voting for the Speaker of the House or whatever. I can't see why they can't be in one election, because if I'm going to run, I step up and I said, I want to run for premier, that's a choice that I made. So I can't now, say, oh, well, I wasn't successful here. Let's have another whole election so I could have another chance. What do you
Well,
think?
it's not just so that you can have another chance. It's just that you're going to then have everybody's terms expiring at the same time. So you see, this is what's going to happen. You're going to get very messy. When you have direct voting for the president, 2 years later, or it's usually halfway through, you have another set of elections for everybody else. So you have some continuity.
how is it
top.
done with the governor in St. Thomas, like in
It's
the
every
U.S.
4
system?
years.
Well, it is every 4 years, and then it's every 2 years for
The
the
same-
Senate. But
the same
remember,
kind
it's
of
a totally different system, because the
Right.
governor has his cabinet that he appoints. So his
Oh, he appoints a
commissioners,
cabinet.
his commissioner of finance, and
Right.
his commissioner of housing, whatever. Those are appointed positions.
And they
Your
will fall away.
legislature, because they have a strict separation between their 3 branches of government, between the judiciary, the legislative, and then the executive. We have a system that is modeled on the Westminster system, where you have a little bit of a fusion between the legislative and the executive branch. So the executive is actually taken out of the legislative branch. So that is why
In the U.S. system.
you would have that in the U.S. system. So when you have your premier and your deputy premier, if you have direct voting, and then the other persons on their ticket are not elected, you could end up in a very, messy.
end up
That was
We
when we were
could
discussing it.
end up with real democracy.
Well,
and maybe what the people want.
perhaps, I think what people wanted really wasn't, that is a term that they use to express their challenge.
Their
And-
frustration.
yes. But I think all they were saying was that we want to be able to say that we had an opportunity to cast an X for this person who's premier.
So can we say it another way?
Well, we have said it another way.
Okay.
So what we have said is what we have recommended, and which is easier, is to appoint your premier from amongst your at-large candidates, successful at-large
So,
candidates.
to explain,
I think that's
I mean,
great.
I agree with that too, but I mean, you guys are still not bringing it
No,
home
but
for
to
me. Why I can't go to the polls every 4 years and have 3 ballots and vote for who I want to lead the country, put them in the House of Assembly, and let them work.
If to do that, you'll turn the Constitution upside down and you'll need to revamp your whole elections procedure and the
Can we
whole
do that?
Constitution.
We would love to do that.
I do believe.
what we did,
want to
Cindy,
see.
was we listened to the people. The people everywhere you went. We
Well,
had
if you
public
listen
meetings
to the
in
people, it
district.
sounded like the people wanted to turn it upside down to me.
What the people wanted to do,
No? Okay.
but what they said was, we want to be able to vote for the premier.
For the premier.
And what we did was try to figure out a way that that can happen without turning the Constitution upside down.
So your suggestion
not
was
going
to pull it from
0
the
to
at-large.
100, but trying to find something that would achieve the purpose, but without turning the entire Constitution upside down. Because as Lisa said, it's important that the leader of the country enjoys support
From
in the
the
House. So what we have now is that the premier is the person who is able to command the support of the majority of the, the persons in the House. So that's what we have now, and what we had recommended, we recommended actually 2 models. And it's not cast in stone, as Lisa would have explained
What's the other
in the
model?
opening. In the opening, the premier and whoever is on the negotiating team is free to tinker with it. It's good if the public also give their input and feedback through fora like this, so that perhaps we may come up with something that is bespoke, but it will work. So what we recommended was that you can choose your premier from amongst the at-large candidates, and one of the other things that we recommended is actually to go to a system where you have all persons running at large, and
I
then
love that. That's really what I want.
That is how it used to be.
It used to be like that?
Yes.
so those are 2 completely different models, and those were
They
the
want districts.
options that we looked at as being things that could work, but wouldn't turn the entire system upside down. So going from 0 to 20 or 30 rather than 0 to 100.
I would like to see an at-large elected premier. One, he would enjoy the support of a greater degree of the population.
Of course,
Right
he would
now-
be elected by the people.
Yeah, right now the premier enjoys the support of his party.
Yes, and I wanted to have that conversation.
Even if the population thinks that there is incompetence, he still gets the support of his party.
Right. Because oh, sorry, go ahead.
And the likelihood of him winning another seat in a district elected, if the district people likes him, then you could repeat yourself for years, 2 terms, term after term, because you have a district who likes the leader of the party, and he becomes premier again, even though there is manifest.
Popular vote.
Right.
Yeah.
But that is a Westminster
That's the
system. Let me
classic
just tell you,
Westminster system.
that is a Westminster system, and quite a lot of the countries around the world, the
Operate under
British
that
Empire,
system.
was all
Operate
over, and then
successfully.
we are using this system in a number of countries, in the Caribbean, in places in Africa, Australia. So this is not something that is unique to the
You mean
BVI.
what we're
And I
doing
think
now?
that I want to sort of make that
Yes.
point. This is
Yeah.
what happens
Our-
in the
our
United
model,
Kingdom.
yes.
This is our model.
So
and
can
so
we
there are
say-
tweaks, but this is not a unique situation.
The challenge, and this is what has come out of this exercise, is that the Westminster model is not necessarily ideal for small legislatures and small electorates.
But can we mix it up? Can we?
But they tried to mix it up by introducing the at-large, but now the populists have said that isn't working.
And the reason why it's working because it was hijacked by the parties.
But because, so that is a conversation. So we must mention here the report, Neville Duncan report, which we have to get it somehow for people to read. It's not too long, it's about 15 pages or so. But what
Even I can
he
read that.
said, what he said was a couple of things, and we know that it was meant to have been not at large as in running territory at large, but at large as in running independent candidates.
Okay.
That is what our historians
That's
have reminded us. Yes.
But that used to happen.
So, but it
We
wasn't
need that to
written.
happen again.
The other thing is they were supposed to create a forum for national debate. They were supposed to free up people, the representatives, to be in their districts. They were supposed to create a forum from which ministers could have been appointed. But I don't know why none of this was expressly written and cast in stone. And so it was always, it is supposed to work this way. But as you have deduced, yes, it seems as if the parties got creative and made it into something that was more
Beneficial to
them, which they're free to do because nothing was
There were
said.
there
You
were no
must appoint
parameters.
your ministers from the at-large.
Yeah.
And
So
we made a point in our report, only one government appointed the ministers from that large.
Yes, and I respected
and the
that so
public
much.
servants said it actually worked better.
It did.
The public saw that it worked better. The public
I
saw
believe
that
it
it
did.
worked better.
Can we then say the parties, I mean, we can't, must have their premier elected at large
The parties, we wouldn't get involved
in that
But
level of,
I thought Cindy wanted to make another point when she got so excited when you mentioned about parties. Which is that
Because we, right now we're facing that, right? Where there is, I don't want to bring in the premier, but this is a conversation about this. So there's high disapproval, what we call the popular vote just now that we talked about. And there is really no way to, well, we can do a few things where it ends up that somebody can cross the floor and you have a minority government and they get frustrated and dissolve the whole House of Assembly, or their party change their chairman, replace the chairman, and then the new chairman can, so the parties have a lot of control in our constitution that we don't realize they have, well, our election laws.
Well, and that is what I thought you were getting at. Because one of the recommendations we made that's ancillary to that is to take out the reference to the premier being elected, being
To the leadership
appointed
of the
from the
party.
party that's successful. We have that
we-
in
I'm
ours. I
clapping,
think
but didn't have to
Cayman
wait.
followed a lot. Cayman's review came in 2009, ours came in 2007. So I see they have that reference that we have in party, but the reference to party isn't in the others. Is not in the other constitutions, right? It's just the person who can command the majority. So we have to be balanced here. So when we do these things, you realize that you are more likely to, if they were to be taken on board, you're more likely to end up with a coalition government.
You're
now,
just
what
singing to
about
my
this?
ears.
What about this whole issue that I heard in the debate with Shana and that team, Dr. Smith, about a sixth ministry?
Sixth minister.
Sixth minister.
Yes. So we did recommend that we've reached the stage, we've long reached the stage where the territory needs a sixth minister. You have more than 6 ministries, but the Constitution only allows you, at the moment, 5 ministers.
Right.
This goes back to the point Maya was talking about with separation of powers.
Okay.
You cannot, right now we have our executive, that's part of Westminster. We have our executive that sit in the legislature. we were asked to say, how can the executive be held to account? How can they be held to account when they sit and take up all the government side? Because you have 5 ministers and 2 junior ministers, so you have no backbench. So this is what we were saying when we said the Westminster system doesn't transport well into small jurisdictions.
Yes, yes.
That's an example. So, but anyway, we've reached a stage now where we need to have a 6th minister because there's some ministries that need to be on their own. I agree with that.
Right. But
It
are
does
the numbers
mean-
even or they must be
Well, there is a
uneven?
ratio.
Right.
It's not even about even and uneven. There's a specific ratio that must be followed, which is 2 to 5.
Right.
So, elected persons. So if we're to get one more minister, then we need to have the elected number of House of Representative members
About 15.
increased by 2.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we recommended that those 2 be made at large. Because one of the reports that Duncan said he got was from the BVI public at that time, that was 1998, was, we know it's not working, but how are you asking us to say why it's not working or how it can be improved when it started off at an imbalance in the first place because you have 4 at large and 9 districts, 9 to 4. So you're not comparing them in terms of equal numbers. So we recommended taking those additional 2 seats and making them at large.
Right.
That we have, it has been pointed out to us that that could mean that a party can win all district, no at large, and then can't get the premier. That wouldn't work. I mean, that wouldn't be right. So I think on reflection, what we would have to do is swap the numbers around and make sure that at least one more is at large and the one less is district, so that you can never have a situation where all win, you get a party winning all in district, which is very possible, but not at large. So we on reflection, we probably would need to have tweaked that, but that's not a recommendation, that's a suggestion.
I wanted to understand
Yes.
why it was necessary. And now I realize we do have, when you have a minister, the Minister of Natural Resources, Labor, a whole list of things.
Yes, that's
because
what
we have these amount of ministries.
because
Yes.
you're
And
limited,
limited
to
to 5.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yes, yes.
Now
That's been the,
that's,
hello, John.
Mama,
Welcome
no,
to the,
I'm just find out.
we've been having this conversation for a little while that we needed more ministers because the ministries are, there's so many ministries and they're so heavy.
See, that's why I like to be in a
Right.
room with smart people.
Right.
Intelligent.
But on that, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to take a quick break and we will be right back to continue this conversation. We're about to get hot.
I want to talk about self-determination before we leave Anna.
Okay, wait. Tonight we're discussing or we're breaking down the constitutional review report, and unfortunately I tell you about my late viewers and some of them are asking us to have you guys reintroduce yourselves so they know who. So the thing is, we have quite a large diaspora that tunes in as well. and I'm sure some of them reached out to you. I'm sure they were part of that. So just reintroduce yourselves as we go into the second segment of breaking down the Constitutional Review report, and we're about to get hot, but they're gonna reintroduce themselves.
Yes, so my name is Lisa Penn Lettsam. So I was appointed about 18 months ago or so as the chairman of the Constitutional Review Commission and its executive head. So we did have a series of public consultations where we reached out to persons here and in the USVI, and we also had a special session on Facebook. Some of the persons who attended our private sessions did, for example, patch in the diaspora. We did have one group in particular, and of course our signature event was open to everyone across the world for comments and so forth. So we have submitted a report, and we're happy to be here to be able to publicize it and promote it and get people interested in reading it.
I am Maya Barry. I am Principal Crown Counsel in the Attorney General's Office, and I am also a member of the Constitutional Review Commission.
Bishop John Klein, no stranger. I am almost as popular as Cindy. But suffice to say, my role here tonight is to help further the discussion, be a part of the advancement of the BVI, whether it's constitutionally, politically, socially. That's why we are here. So, God bless.
All right, thank you guys. So welcome back again, and we're discussing we're breaking down the Constitutional Review report, and we've covered a bit of it, I'd say, already, governor's powers and so forth. And before we went on the break, we were actually speaking about, elections, the process that we could or could not do, the whole Westminster system, whether we should turn the Constitution on its head or not, and we decided not to, by the way. But we wanted to get back to, I had a couple more questions, and that was in relation to recalling not only ministers, but any member of the House of Assembly, so having that recall option.
Yes.
And also, what was the other one that I said? Term limits. Term limits, yes.
Yes. So in terms of, before the break, we were discussing the difference, which is very important, between directly voting for the premier and deputy premier, as opposed to appointing those offices from your successful at-large candidates.
Yeah.
So this is another reason why it's important to make that distinction and not try to muddle different constitutional models. So term limits, during this exercise, learned that term limits really are a feature of presidential systems to kind of keep your president in check and balance, and to lessen the risk of that person becoming a dictator. It's not really something that traditionally you would have found in the Westminster model. That said, the UK did implement recently legislation for, no, they don't have term limits. They implemented legislation for recall, which also, again, was not traditionally a Westminster. So for the term limits, no, a significant number of persons asked for term limits to be introduced. We weren't really given much detail whether they wanted a complete blank term limits, you can just run for
across
X amount and that's it, forever and ever, amen, or whether it could be staggered. So we do have staggered term limits in some overseas territories.
I was going to say that I believe the premier.
Yes. Yes.
I think he has to take a term break,
There
that.
has to be in between,
Right.
yes. And there's one of the other smaller OTs that has it as well. So we did not feel comfortable recommending it, because just as many people who argued for it argued against it. And a number of persons said that term limits do take away their democratic right to have the person they want represent them.
So what we have done is said, if you're gonna go the route where you vote directly for your premier, you actually get a ballot and say premier, 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 and then deputy premier, deputy premier. Term limits would be more relevant. If you go the route that we've recommended, which is that you appoint your premier from your at-large, term limits become less significant. So that we in light of our preference for appointing the premier from the at-large, we did not recommend term limits
At all?
at all.
Okay. I have a question here from Facebook.
Well, before you go there, did the recall?
We haven't spoken about
Maybe
recall
Oh,
let
yet.
me
you haven't
just
done that
add
yet.
That we did say, though, that if they wanted to do that, is something that should be put to a referendum.
Okay. Okay, the term limits.
Because we didn't
Okay.
have an overwhelming, support for either
Right.
having it or not having it. So
Right.
that
So
is
it'd be fair
something
to
that
see
we
where
should
everybody
settle.
comes down on it. Okay.
We did recommend recall provisions.
Okay.
We did recommend that.
On what,
in what way, yeah.
and there, yeah.
But I think what will have to happen is you would need to flesh out in legislation the basis for which the person can be recalled. The public wanted it for immoral and unethical behavior, so that sort of detail will not be in the Constitution.
Right.
That would be in separate
Right.
recall legislation.
The fact that they can be recalled and then
Yes.
they'll determine through legislation
For what?
how.
Yes, and
and
what
what.
constitutes immoral or unethical behavior.
Yeah.
We did recommend, though, that there be a safe harbor period and that there should be a high threshold. It shouldn't be, that Cindy is not happy today and then she gets, 50 people and then those
So-
persons agitate and then we have the signature. So it shouldn't be, we should give persons a sufficient amount of time. So we did recommend a safe harbor period and things like that. But the mechanics of how it will work, that we thought should be fleshed out in legislation. It wouldn't be appropriate to put all of that detail in the
Is
Constitution.
there a present code of ethics for ministers?
Right.
There are two documents. So there's the Integrity in Public Life that they
That's right.
just brought into effect. That
Yes.
that has appended to it a schedule with a code of ethics that
Okay.
applies to all public officers, so not just elected persons. And then for ministers, there is a ministerial code, and it has been around from 2021. But we seem to have a challenge in this territory with publicizing documents that are public.
Yeah, we're going to get to
And
that.
so the code, we had actually, as the CRC, we ourselves had difficulty in finding it. And we could not find it. We had to use or other resources to find it. But when we
My
did
goodness.
find it, what we found was reference to it. But in terms of finding the document itself, we couldn't find it. When we finally got it, we did see that it does also address ethics.
Well, okay, we're not here for that tonight, so let's just keep it, So there's a question, and wait, with the recall, this is very important to note. So it was more of ethics, you said? Ethics and morals and immoral behavior, et cetera, et cetera, et
That's
cetera.
what people wanted.
So
That's
it-
what persons wanted.
Was
Yes,
there
yes.
any conversation on dissatisfaction of an elected rep?
No, one of the things we did when we made the recommendations, one of the reasons that we said, as Maya said, the threshold to be able to have a successful recall petition is very high. We would suggest that it be very high. That was a
When you
recommendation.
say very high, give me an example.
A high percent, like 80% of persons, for example, not just 51% of persons who
But that's
voted
democracy.
And
50 plus 1.
80% of the persons who voted
for you
in
Vo-
the general
that
election.
whether voted for against, but voted for that.
So,
in that,
if you didn't
yes.
vote and you decided you were going to stay home, you don't then get to complain and go and vote at the
Yes.
recall.
You see, Cindy, the reason, remember,
sign for the recall.
we don't have a direct democracy where persons stay from their living room and govern and
all decisions are made and put out through a referendum for them to vote, and that's how the country is run. That's very European. We have a representative democracy. A party is supposed to run, or a person who's contesting election, they're supposed to tell you what they stand for, what they would support, what they wouldn't support. That gives you an idea of whether you would give that person a vote. You're supposed to be in touch with that person's in touch with you. They make all sorts of promises. You elect them to represent you. Right. So it is not fundamentally right that you have a representative in there. You have entrusted this person to represent you, and right off the bat, into 6 months, you want to recall them, and only 50% of the persons who voted in that election can come back, or 51. That's not right. You have to give persons a chance to deliver on their promise.
Absolutely agree. I absolutely agree with you. I believe in the year thing, 1 year.
One?
Yes, absolutely. Because we sit under too much for 4 years. And 4 years is a lot of your life to waste. So talk about 8. I mean, that's just my personal feeling. I say a year. That's my threshold. It certainly isn't going to be 3 years, because in the next 6 months we'd be preparing for elections. So we're going to watch that one. We got to watch that one.
What we did recommend is a safe harbor period, and as Lisa said, the mechanics of it will be walked out in legislation. So of course, you are free to, submit your comments to your elected representatives, because, if we have it included in the Constitution, it will, the mechanics of it would be walked out.
I'm actually going to make sure I get one of these things printed, because I'm going to circle everything that I know is not going to make it in. We know it's not going to make it in.
But and we'll come to, as Cindy was saying, I was making a note, and I want to ask the question. A premier that is, your recommendation is a premier be selected from an at-large?
A successful at-large.
A successful at-large.
Well, actually, there are 2 recommendations.
Okay,
and then you could also have a completely at-large slate. So we just tried to come up with models. Well, I'm just letting you know that there are 2 things.
But how do you see, let's say, for instance, the present premier, who has enjoyed the confidence of his people in the 7th district, yeah?
Yes, the 7th district.
Giving up the leadership of the party to introduce such a recommendation to the United Kingdom. He's not at large. And to do that, put him at risk. So even though it may be good and preferred and even desired by the people, you have a leader who may be threatened to not be the next premier, if that should be the case, and he's a very young man.
And we have a lot of examples of where our elected reps are working for themselves as opposed to the best interests of the people. That's why I said that I'm advocating for seeing that the final document is actually what the people want.
That's just a concern.
Yeah.
You understand what I'm saying?
I understand. Just 2 comments on that.
Okay.
And a third is, remember, this is just a recommendation.
Yeah.
Right.
The other 2 comments were that the premier wouldn't have to give up his position. The John Doe is currently premier. John Doe is also head of the party that's in power. But he doesn't have to give up his position as head of the party to be able to contest a seat at large.
No, he doesn't. But if he runs at large, the likelihood of him winning greatly diminishes.
With certain individuals. With certain individuals, yeah. Right. So I would say to that, you are assuming that every party model has the head of the party in the House. There are some party models where your head of your political party is not a member of the House.
What?
Right, but
Oh,
then,
okay, I see
right,
what you
meaning
mean.
that they didn't win
Yeah, yeah,
their
yeah.
seat, and
No,
so
no,
they had
no.
to.
With a Labour Party or like for example, a socialist type parties, just like the General Secretary is the head of that party.
Okay.
Your
But you
Conservative
understand-
Party
but you
is
understand what I'm saying in
yes,
terms of
yes, but
the risk.
we're familiar with what we have, but I'm just saying that it need not be. You're familiar with the head of the party being.
But it's spoken to in our constitution
But-
or in our election laws that the head of the party.
If the party wins the sweep, yes, then
Yeah.
that's where you go.
Right.
But there's also a second fallback position if that's not the case.
So let's
you
say the
don't have
party
to have that.
wins, but-
So there's also a provision where if the party doesn't have a sweep, then the fallback position is the person who is in the view of the governor best able to command the majority. I think I just did a comparison of constitutions, and I think only probably only two of the like 7 constitutions on this side of the world, OTs, have that reference to parties. The others don't.
Right. But I think also what John is trying to say is that as we have it set up now, and it's probably not going to change, the head of the party is probably going to have to run at large for the chance of
yes,
yeah.
yes.
And,
But
and and he may not be willing, or that person may not be willing
to adjust this in
to
the
adjust, to
Constitution.
take this constitutional recommendation forward, knowing it puts at risk.
correct.
His
But just for the
possibility.
record, you have political parties where the head of the party is not in the House of Assembly
Right.
or not in your parliament.
Right.
You check your Labour Party structure, for example, and the Conservative Party, that's their model, but a more leftist socialist party, that's
Yeah.
not their model.
Okay.
So the question that was coming from the public, if the Westminster system is not working for us, then why keep settling with the excuse that our democratic challenges are not unique to us? Is the aim not the advancement of our political systems of governance?
Interesting comment. I can just agree. I mean, there is a lady by the name of Cynthia Giles Barrow Giles, and she has been advocating this for years. She's a professor at UWI, and we quote her in our reference. Unfortunately, she hasn't printed, I'm not aware that she's printed her paper as yet, published it, but there is circulating a professional lecture that she gave it's about a year ago. And she advocates this very same thing. Why are we wedded to the Westminster system?
Right.
And
And that's what I was saying, can we not mix it up? Can we just not make it ours?
So if you think about, I heard on the discussion, Levins spoke a lot about district councils and
Yes, that was the next thing.
those kind of a thing. How do they fit within this construct, or do they?
Well, one of the things that we were thinking when we heard Parsons talk, it came up primarily with Anigada and Jos Van Dyke and whether or not they needed their own representative. But sort of before going there, one of the things that we thought could happen when we were discussing this, and based on the public feedback that we got during the consultative exercises, is that if we had, for instance, an entirely a legislature that was entirely at-large representatives, you could have the local district councils dealing with the things that happen in a district. Now that is, one of the recommendations that we've put forward. We don't know if it will be accepted.
Oh, you did put it forward?
Having the legislature and all the postings in the legislature be made up of at-large candidates, or candidates who run at large. And if you think about it, one of the suggestions was that that would pair well with having district councils in every district. Of course, we also recommend that those councils, have power to deal with local issues, and then that would free up your legislature to deal now with national issues. However, the district council discussion really more came up out of the discussion about Anegada and Jos Van Dyke having their own representative. And we wanted to figure out, what it is that they really want. And if you listen to them, they want local issues addressed. So there are issues that are unique to their district. So what is it that they want? Do they want a representative that is in Road Town, going to the House of Assembly, etc.?
And visiting them every month.
Exactly. But what you hear from them is that they want somebody in their district, somebody that understands that, there's a wall over there that's falling down and we need assistance. Somebody that understands that they need things, and we want to refer to it as one of the consultations we had, refer to them as those hyper local issues. That's the attention that they need. And we thought that perhaps what we need to look at is then whether or not putting district councils in place to address those hyperlocal issues like water and potholes and things like that. But of course, it would have to be paired with giving them adequate decision-making power and giving them resources to address those things. So we could now craft a model that would work, and then you free up the persons that sit in your legislature to deal with issues of national significance. And that is something that we can look at. Now, happily, Cabinet has said that they, I know that there has been a Cabinet decision, it's been announced that they are looking to district, they're looking to come up with a model for district councils, and what that ultimately will look like, what the reporting structure and what the relationship will be between your district council and your district representative and things like that, I guess will be, the mechanics of that are yet to be ironed out, but it will be interesting to see where that lands. But our recommendation
if your junior
is
ministers don't have a lot of power, I don't see under this construct how a district council have any power, especially if you don't fund them.
Well, the junior ministers don't have any powers. Generally, they don't, relatively speaking, and then they don't have a statute identifying what their authority is, because there's really none. The difference here is you will have legislation for your district councillors. So this is another example where you don't put the detail in the Constitution. The recommendation is that you insert one sentence in the Constitution: there shall be district councils for the Virgin Islands enacted by the House of Assembly.
And district councillors would be elected, or?
That is something that they would have to decide. So you have some models where the district councillors are elected, some where they're not. And the other good thing with the district council is that it creates a training ground for politicians to be, House of Representative members to be, if we decide not to put them in the House. But you can, it really just depends on what your resources are, how much money you have, how much you want to really spend, how much time you have to spend on legislating for this. And I must add, district councillors and persons who are typically paid a full-time salary. They're paid a modest stipend.
Like a board.
Yes.
Okay.
And so it's really that it's something like your Justice of the Peace a long time ago, who would, have all the forms, like your registrar used to be. You remember when you were born years ago, they stopped it now, but when I was born, you were registered with your registrar in your district. You didn't come to town to register your birth. I think
they sent a donkey with mine.
You had a register, and just as a point of interest, this is why a lot of our names are not spelled correctly.
Well, I have 2 birth dates. I am the 18th and the 10th.
Oh my goodness.
So you see, all those local services were handled in the district.
All right.
And so there's no legislation now, and there's the opportunity to fashion what we would want. So if it's something that's taken forward, it would then be something that is enacted in legislation, and the House of Assembly would have the ability to come up with something that is modeled off of, district councils as they exist around the world, or something more bespoke, and that would speak to, our unique circumstances as they exist in the Virgin Islands.
Right. So let's do some quick punch subjects, and then we're
Yeah.
gonna get to self-determination. We're keen on getting to that, but what about, let's talk quickly about accessibility to laws, election campaign financing. The register of interest is declaration of interests, right? So
Yes.
we're on that now, but election campaign financing.
Sort of and not quite.
Okay, let's
yes.
talk about it.
So register of interest is registering your, registering your potential conflicts. So it's the wider thing. Declaration of contracts is that specific provision in the Constitution that says if you want to run, you got to put your, advertise any contracts that you're affiliated with.
Yeah.
You have to put them in the Gazette. And then once you get a seat, you're successful. If you have another contract again, you got to then make that known. So there was some misinterpretation of those provisions, especially the one that says if you're in the House and you have another contract, when you're exempted from having to vacate your seat for not disclosing that contract in time. So we recommended that that language be tidied up and actually be structured in a way, physically structured, in a way that when you look at it, it is easy to read. Because right now it's all muddled in a big paragraph, and it has led to misinterpretation
Yes,
as to when you're
absolutely.
exempt.
Election campaign financing.
Everybody, that wasn't an overwhelming topic, but when it was raised, everyone agreed that there should be some regime, and they moved on. It was like,
So
no.
Did you address it at all in
We
the Constitution?
we recommended that again, another sentence be put in the Constitution to say that there should be a regime for election, yes. But again, the actual details would go in separate legislation. You see, if you don't put things in the Constitution,
You can't legislate.
then
Well, you can, but-
it might be delay and.
Well, I
but if you
mean,
put it in the Constitution, you have a better, a stronger argument and a better stance from which to argue. This is actually a constitutional requirement
I mean, we still don't have the Human Rights Commission.
because that was
From
not mandatory.
2000.
It said
Oh.
may. It didn't say
Ooh.
it shall.
It
You'd
say
say
may.
for
It
Human
said
Rights
may.
Commission, you say in the Constitution may?
The
You
present
said- so what have
Constitution
you
says
done?
may. We say shall. To change it to shall.
Thank you very much.
Yes.
What was your question?
Really?
I know, I'm like, I'm
English
but
language
we
is a
can't blame-
funny thing.
Yes, it is, but we can't blame her, they're doing the second one.
No,
So we thank you
no,
for correcting
the
that.
legal, that's where you have
Yeah. May means
these
you don't
legal
have to.
minds.
Yeah.
Because
These
May
legal
will not
minds-
stand up in a court of law.
These legal
as
minds have the
something
world turned
that you have
upside
to.
down.
Right. It says they may, it's section 34, they may be established.
Yes, so now it shall be.
Well, the recommendation
is
is
shall.
that
It shall be.
Yes.
I mean, these are things we need to move into a modern Virgin Islands, modern
Yeah.
democracy. The fact that we're not even trying to make it happen is just, those are like, well, you guys don't have to
No, we can't.
have
no.
these conversations.
Yeah.
I vent from time to time.
I mean, it
But you know what I would say to this? We need to read. As a BVI population, we need to read more.
yeah.
I agree.
I can understand that nobody's going to want to. It's a daunting task to pick this up. But generally, we need to spend a little bit more time reading.
It was daunting
But we have
for
to
me.
read with,
And not-
we
not-
have to read with a
I know, to make it more interesting, it has to be something.
A
You have to
certain
read
set
with
of eyes.
focus. Yes,
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
because I would have never picked that up.
Yeah, well, I'm going to pick
May
it up
and
now
shall.
because I'm telling
No,
you, I'm
I
going
know
to
you will pick it
circle.
up anyway you see
you know what?
it.
I've taken it up some, but I just get to the, I don't think I get past page 20.
No,
Because
no.
every second I
but
have
now
something
it
to
would
read,
be
but-
easier to go through.
Yes.
Having this
Dissected. having
yeah
it dissected.
overview of it, and now you can take recommendation by recommendation.
Yes.
See what went into making the recommendation. What are
Yes.
some of the public debate that has gone into making the recommendation, and you are able then to offer a more informed opinion.
Yes.
Yeah, so I can appreciate that. Is there anything about decolonization or anything in the document?
So that's self-determination. So we,
Okay.
do you
Let-
want to go there or?
Just not quite.
Let-
I know that's your
let-
topic. It's
no,
all about
no,
topic.
let's
but
Cindy
I want
go.
to. I just want
wanted-
to knock out some
I
really
picked it up
quickly.
from a text I got actually.
Okay, like FOI, Freedom of Information legislation.
We recommended
I'm a-
that.
You. What does the words say? What are your words? Shall, may, or what?
Actually the government has committed to passing freedom of information
Yeah, well, they said that for 20
legislation.
years.
So we recommended, I think it, no, she's onto this, Michelle.
Yes, because I need some results.
It's in the first, it's under her ministerial government, so.
Yeah. That's another thing
It's
I'm
at the
advocating for now for a very long time.
bottom.
So I need the shalls or mays.
I think we recommended it to be.
I'll have to look for it.
Okay.
But I think all we recommended was that there be freedom of information legislation.
Okay,
That
there-
would be
okay.
enacted.
Yeah, it's
There shall be.
recommendation number 5. The territory should enact
There
freedom
we
of
go.
information legislation.
That's perfect wording. Thank you. The other thing is judge only, because this is another big conversation, judge only criminal trials. Yeah.
Mhm,
Where did you guys
juryless trials.
come down on that? Recommended?
I think we recommended that it be put out for consultation widely,
Okay.
but our preference was perhaps to give it favorable consideration.
What are some of the other OTs doing in terms of that? I know in Cayman they have it. I don't know for
I
the
don't
others.
I don't think it's,
No, they don't have it in Cayman.
Yeah,
I
they
don't
do.
think anyone has it. It's
Yes, they do.
It's
They have it in Turks. I know
They
that.
have it in Cayman.
Well, in our constitution, trial by jury is a fundamental human right. It's in section 16. And so there have been calls to look at
By judge only.
having trial by judge alone. What we did think is that we should leave it as a human right, but let it be subject to persons having the
You can make
ability
the
to make
choice.
the
Right.
To make the
application to the
election.
judge, and then the judge would determine. So the
Right.
accused, for
Persons
instance,
or-
so either party. So it could be
Okay.
that they, for instance, the
Prosecution.
prosecution has reasons why, they want to make an application to the judge to have a judge alone, or it could be the defense. The defense might feel, there's no way I can get a fair trial. I want, or maybe it will be faster, for whatever reason. But we did think it's something that, should have legislation to sort of work out the mechanics of when and how these things would work.
Okay. Alrighty. So let's jump on self-determination. Make that the next big thing, and then there are some other little bits that are important. But let's talk about
I'll let them lead.
self-determination.
I'll let them lead, and let's hear what you have recommended.
Yeah, it's a
Yes.
hot topic. So-
I would just open this by saying what I have said during public consultations and the educational sessions. Self-determination it's not synonymous and it's not interchangeable with independence.
Okay.
Right.
We found during our sessions that there were two groups of persons. There was one group that wanted to talk about self-determination because they thought it meant independence.
Okay.
And then there was another group that did not want to talk about self-determination, did not want to talk about it because they thought it meant independence. So I know that there have been efforts to try and bring this topic to the public, but I question, as a result of that observation, I question whether it's been successfully done, because what you want is you want everyone to be able to feel proud enough to self-determine. But if you have some who are afraid because they think it means something it doesn't, you've actually started the educational process
Wrong.
in the wrong way, right? And it's backfiring. It's
Yeah.
counterproductive. So that is something that needs to be addressed. We need to speak about self-determination in an apolitical way,
Yeah,
and
I
we
agree.
need to speak about it in a transparent and holistic and balanced way, right?
Because we'll end up like Brexit.
So it again goes back to what I'm saying. We need to read more and not necessarily take what people say. So on self-determination, we hear a lot about the UN 1541 Charter and resolution, which gives 3 main ways to self-determine as far as the UN is concerned, which would be, apart from independence, integration. That's the European version. So we know that the French islands, for example, are integrated into the European countries. And the other one is free association. That is the precursor status that the British used to, for the other Caribbean territories that are now independent. The British have taken that off the table.
Oh, have they?
Yes, yes, that's off the table. And the British don't integrate. They don't, that's not what they do.
yeah.
I have read, for example, where in the midst of the Falkland War, they were trying to determine, oh, what is the, let's think about a quick and easy way to really solve this problem, address it constitutionally. And integration came up at that point. And even in the heart of war. So they do not integrate. That's not their model. They've taken free association off the table.
So does before you go on, does non-integration mean that we can never have representation in the House of Parliament?
Well, that's a different one. I'll let Maya address that. Or maybe she probably wouldn't want to. I'll address that. But so just to finish off the options,
yes.
I think in your forum, I think we remembered, we pointed out to your group, because you had a private meeting, there's a 4th option, which we do not hear about. So this is why I'm saying that it would be, if we need to deal with these things apolitically and fairly and balanced. Otherwise, people who you want to bring on board, you actually are alienating them and making them feel intimidated. So there's actually a 4th option, which is any other political status freely determined by the peoples of the territory.
And what does that mean?
So
That's a
that means that when we had our 1976 Constitution, we elevated to a point where we got an advanced Constitution in 2007. That is self-determination. We have self-determined. We have, because we moved forward.
Right.
And we were given more responsibilities, and more of the governor's more of the governor's remit were taken away and given and devolved to local government, right? Even with the 2007 Constitution, our Constitution says that on matters of international affairs, the governor shall, I think it says shall, your favorite word from tonight, shall devolve them to local government. A number of the other OT's constitution says may, or says shall. People need to appreciate these things. So that is another aspect of that relationship where you have this letter of entrustment with devolving these things that are mandatory, right? It says where a minister has these subjects under his portfolio, the governor shall devolve those things. So by letter of entrustment. So that all of that, we are self-determining.
Yeah.
So it doesn't mean independence, but I understand and I appreciate that at some point, self-determination must lead to independence.
Right.
That is the ultimate, right? When it happens is a different thing.
So how do you juxtapose self-determination and decolonization?
So part of, this is one of the things we recommended because we were specifically asked, a very specific term of reference, what are the next steps? So one of the next steps would be a decolonization commission.
And that's
A decolonization commission.
Yes, that could help with the education as well. And some
so
of
that's
these
what the
little
premier is
things-
doing right now, right? He's bringing this group.
No, that commission will be appointed locally. Or at least
Okay.
it will be our commission, yes?
Well, it's just a mission then. There's a
Oh,
UN mission coming
that's
to
just, yes, that's
review
what
our
you're-
readiness. Okay,
yes,
that's something
yes.
different.
And Corbyn, Dr. Carlyle Corbyn also
Mm-hmm.
did a template where he gives you these indicators of readiness. He
Right.
did one for Guam, he did one for us, he did one for Bermuda, he did a fourth one, I think about 4 of them, I think. But those are the 3 that have come to mind.
Okay. Do you know what the results of ours was?
We're not ready,
Right.
but
We
I mean,
certainly
his-
did that. That didn't come out public.
his
We know
We
he
didn't
was
read it.
here. It didn't come out.
It was publicized.
Was it?
It was publicized.
I know Shana
but
mentions
it's
it a
not.
lot.
It's difficult to find things on the government's website, and that's one
Yeah.
of the things we recommend. It needs to be
Yeah.
a central repository. It should be the ministries, the relevant ministries' website, or some. But it's difficult to find things.
Do you
But
think
this
it's
report is
deliberate?
there. No, I think it is just, we're just all over the place. There's
It's
so
just
much going
disorganized.
on. You know, I'm trying to find my baby's pictures. I can't find them now because they're on CD-ROM and you can't, there's
Right.
nothing now to convert them. Long ago, it used to be, and I think this is still a law. I don't know if I'm sending Maya to look at the stuff, old laws, but it used to be the law that a report, when it was tabled, automatically a copy went to the public library. And one, I think the House of Assembly's office would have had one, it was called LegCo at the time, and one had to be published by the ministry. So your go-to place to look for a report back then was the public library, because
Right.
that's the one that was publicly accessible.
Can I ask a question?
But now you have technology, and technologies keep evolving. I tried before I came here, for example, to look for the Crown policy, Crown lands policy. I'm like, okay, it has to be appended to a news release. So I went to the news release and I'm like, whoa, good. And I found it.
I was going to
But
say
guess
you find
what?
a lot of things in the news releases.
Yes, but guess what? It wasn't the report that was appended. It was just the front page and what do you call that square thing with the black and white? With the links?
I don't know, but
The
was
block
the
that
Crown
you get
policy,
them,
was
you
it
get
released to
them.
the public though?
It was, but you had to use, I can't say I'm showing up my age because I
Tabs?
don't know what I'm talking about. When you go to these restaurants, you get this link.
Barcode.
The barcode.
Oh,
it's a code. So it was
the
just
barcode.
It wasn't the
QR
actual
code.
a QR code. It wasn't the actual document that was attached to the news release. So,
But
you see,
Lisa,
we're
I don't recall the
evolving.
Crown land thing being released to
Yes,
the
it is.
public.
Yeah, it is.
I have one final
need to see because I've
question
been trying to see
in
it
terms
too.
of the
So
Constitution.
you need a phone to be able to see it because you're going to need to hold your phone up to the QR
Okay,
code
yeah.
and then get it.
No
and,
problem.
And my question is this, because I know we are close,
Yes.
is one of the things we suffer from here in the Virgin Islands is we have no consistency and continuity in terms of a national development plan for whether it's economics, whether it's infrastructure, whether it's healthcare, some of the basic needs of our citizens. Can we, or have you, put anything that would mandate elected governments into the Constitution that ties them to ensuring the provision of such services be not only funded but maintained, like roads? You know, it's from one government to the other, the road could be fixed, it could not be fixed, depends on priorities. So is there anything tied in the that can be constitutionally written that ties government to ensuring those services?
As you were talking, I jotted down 3 points, and none is specifically on all fours with the way you have phrased it. But I can tell you, we did refer to better planning when we talked about the next steps to self-determination. One of the recommendations is that there's a need for an urgent population study. So you know what you have, what you need. You can do a sort of a gap analysis. You need a study on the costs and benefits of self-determination on its own. And so it comes in there, the issue of better planning. The issue of planning also came in when we talked about public consultation, transparency, the very first topic that we delved into. And we recommended there that the provision in the Constitution which talks about standing orders, that the House of Assembly shall make their own standing orders, that it goes a little bit further and says that which reflect representative democracy, public participation, and those sorts of things. But in terms of funding, because then you trailed off into specifically looking at funding, the closest recommendation to that would be where we recommended an amendment to the Constitution to mandate that the House of Assembly guarantees to certain independent institutions, those that don't have the, well, those that have the budget in and of themselves, that the Constitution be amended so that there's a provision in there where the House of Assembly would guarantee those institutions their budget, and a budget that's sufficient and adequate for those institutions to carry out their responsibilities. Slightly separate point, but that's the only way in which we raised it. You don't want your DPP to be held hostage and can't bring in some specialist because, you know, she has to go through budgetary approval and go through HR for staffing, and compete with everybody else for money, because, you know, you don't want to fetter those independent authority of those, or appear to be fettering through the back door. So we did recommend that they be guaranteed a sufficient budget. But that's not on all fours with your point.
Yeah, because I find it is one of the things that really cripples us. Because if there's every 4, every 8 years, you see this degradation, whether it's in the infrastructure, we're suffering water, we're suffering roads, we still have, I would say, subpar healthcare system compared to our neighbors. And so much of it is tied to funding and priority, but we have parties.
Oh my goodness. Parties. Where do we come down on Where do we come down on constitutional bodies possibly being removed from under the deputy governor's office and given their own budget, etc., that they can be actually fully independent?
Just that last recommendation, that was the big takeaway for that one, that they be given administrative and financial independence. So we dealt with the financial independence by having that, well, we're recommending that there be that guarantee that the House of Assembly will ensure, will more than ensure, actually guarantee that they have a sufficient budget. We dealt with the other aspect, the administrative aspect of it. For example, you know, why should the Auditor General have to go through 15 steps with HR to get, you know, a critical member of staff, perhaps an investigator or something like that, when there should be some sort of discretion because of the nature and independence of that body. So what we found was an old piece of legislation which devolved the powers of PSC to certain independent institutions, but not several of them. So our recommendation was to really deal with that. That was an easy one, to fix that right away. I think it was just overlooked.
Okay.
But at least so that those offices can have their own ability to hire certain staff. Now it only applies to junior staff, but the next step would be the more
Can we
senior
sue the
staff.
government?
That is a very good point. And in fact, I'm glad you raised it because it reminded me of something that we always, even within our own meetings, we always had to be reminding one another of. Anything you put in the Constitution exposes the government to potential financial liability. So, and that is also one of the reasons why we didn't put everything in here, you know. So for example, the right to secondary education is an example. You know, that's already, it's not a right, but we already have it in the Education Act. But if you elevate it to the level of putting it in the Constitution because you want to be a trailblazer, and something happens, then government can be sued.
We need to sue the government for water.
Well, the government can be sued anyway under the Education Act, but now you have another avenue for which to sue the government. And this is one of the reasons why we didn't recommend that statutory bodies be put in the Constitution, because they're supposed to be independent. Government's way of monitoring them is through annual reports. So if government says you're independent and gives you your budget and you're out there doing your thing, apart from the human rights, which does bind statutory bodies to a certain extent, you really don't want government to be financially liable for acts that they're carrying out, you know, and that government has no monitoring, day-to-day monitoring mechanism for. The day-to-day monitoring mechanisms for statutory board comes through their boards of directors.
But water is a basic human right. That's just,
it is a basic human
that's just
right.
what.
But are you asking if you can sue government, or is it, what is it called when an entire group of citizens...
Class action?
Class action. Is that what you're asking? Because you can sue government. But is that what you're asking, or are you asking about class action suit?
Well, I wanted to know...
Because that's where we can sue for water. Do we have that in the Constitution? Was that addressed?
No, but we have we were blazing the trail back in 2007. We have a present provision in the Constitution for protection of the environment. I don't know if that would really be the appropriate thing, but that might come the closest.
I can read that because
Yeah.
the environment is not being protected, not here in the Virgin Islands. Not when you go by Village Key and when you see the
town was
runoff.
bubbling today with sewage.
Oh my God!
where
I
people
drove
should
by my
store.
office.
But
No, by infinite debt?
there too?
Oh, yes.
Oh my God! But the premier is always traveling and dealing with climate change. Anyway, let's not digress.
Hold
There
it
is
down.
a
We have government people here. So-
there was something that was said, and I guess I'm just trying to bring it together. It's one of the questions I was given to bring here. What is meant by bodily integrity in your report as it relates to freedom, the right to freedom to fish without a license?
So those are two different things. So those
Okay,
are
that's what
so I'm glad to see that people are reading, because again, that's one of those, like the section, the ouster clause. Unless
Okay.
you dig, you're not going to
Right.
find those things.
We know
So-
it's fishermen in there.
So we had a very passionate gentleman who raised this right to fish and farm, and reminded us as well not to forget that he raised it. So we honored that request. We did our research, and what we found was there's no constitutional right to fish or farm without a license. The emphasis is without a license.
Okay.
What you do find in constitutions is that there's a progressive provision where a government might be tasked under the Constitution with enacting legislation to protect fishing, or like in, I guess, some parts of Asia, you might have unique methods of fishing, that sort of thing. But you don't, there's no constitution that guarantees you a right to fish and farm without a license.
Right.
So
So what is
we-
it that they felt like we had the right to? What is
the-
in the sea?
The person
And
is
to-
saying that if you're just
A line fisherman.
yes, and it's yours, it's your sea, it's
Why can't I go
Right.
feed
you
my
go in the
family?
backyard and do that. So, and you shouldn't have to have a license to do that. Now, the only thing that you can do like that would be if you're going to sit on a rock with a fishing line and you fish. That's fine. But if you're going to go in a boat and just,
Right.
even it's right there, you got to get a license.
Okay.
Once, that's how I understand it, right? Once you go beyond the person just throwing a line from a rock
For personal
on land,
kinda, yeah.
yes, you got it. And the reason for that is because once you get onto that water, you're dealing with international obligations,
Right.
conventions. You're dealing with things that are bigger than just throwing a line out for a fish.
Long gone are those days when you go
Oh my
Sunday
God.
fishing
So
and you
there
have
may be
enough fish
and
to
s-
feed your family for the week.
But Cindy, I think the takeaway on that comment is it was just a singular comment. And we made sure to address it. We researched, we went all over the world looking to see if there were any models and so forth, and it's in our report. And I think that the public should feel confident that we tried our best to address each and every comment, because that
Yeah.
was a singular comment from somebody who was very passionate about it.
Oh, it's
and
big
we
in- it's big in
understood
King
the
Garden Bay.
passion.
It's a big conversation.
We
It's
understood the
surprise.
passion and we tried to address it. But
It's big in King Garden
sort
Bay.
of elevating it to a constitutional right, one of those
Yeah.
fundamental
Wasn't
human
one
rights
of
and
those.
freedom that is
Right.
guaranteed and protected by the
There's no such
Constitution.
thing.
We didn't find any precedent for it anywhere in the world, and of course, we didn't think it was something that could be recommended in those circumstances. And as Lisa said, it does touch and concern, all sorts of other conventions and, migratory fish and all of these types of things that you need to look at, overfishing of certain
Right,
species and
right.
all of these things. So, there's quite a lot that
But they
goes
already
into
have
it.
hind season
And all,
lobster
well, you
season,
have your closed
close this
seasons
season
and all of
and
these
stuff like
things.
that.
So there's quite a lot to go into it. And I think that's just the one
it.
comment that I would want to make is that, we really did address each and every comment.
Okay.
And the other one, which is the sufficient farm and then bodily integrity somebody raised. So this thing about bodily integrity, it's also a rare find. You do find it not in constitutions. I think the only reference we found to it was perhaps in a slight reference in one of those constitutions. I don't know if it was Aruba or one of the ABC islands. I think they had a passing reference to it. But outside of that, it is, I don't know if it's something that you would find in European conventions.
What is it?
Because they're very progressive.
What does it mean?
It is saying essentially that you have the right to say what you want to do with your body.
Oh,
All right, so abortions, that sort of thing. I think, although the person who raised it didn't give this as an example, I believe that it was inspired by the COVID vaccine
Right.
issue.
It's interesting. So nobody else raised about having your body right?
Volunteer, no.
That's interesting. Interesting.
But it's too far-fetched. It's too wide. It's like you're gonna be able to have 18-year-old saying, you know, I want to take out my lung, or, you know,
You
that's
can't
my right, or I want to change from my gender. It's just too wide. It just encompasses so many things that
I wanna have you guys back.
It's better left with, you know, as people will be doing the same thing you do. What does it mean? And then people will be getting very innovative, and then lawsuits will be mounting against the
Euthanasia,
government.
all of these things.
Yeah.
We don't know where and how far that would go. That one is one of those novel ones that perhaps we
It's
should
what
wait for a
America is
future,
struggling with right now.
future constitution perhaps down the road. Let's see where
Right.
the dust settles elsewhere.
America is the most
right.
immoral country on the planet.
Two last things and then we can wrap up. There were some exemptions suggested in chapter 2, page 12.
I'm really glad that people are actually sending us to page 12. So this person has read the executive summary. That's a start.
Oh my God.
Exemption.
Exemptions, this is page 12, they said. So, this is the this is the declarations, declaration of contracts.
Oh,
when you're
okay.
exempt.
Okay, we covered that already then.
Yes.
Yeah.
But let me explain, since the person raised it, because I really would want to reward a person who has gone to the trouble to do this.
To read.
So I would take the time to explain it a little bit more. Now, under our constitution, you can be exempt if you win a seat and you enter into another contract with somebody, then you have to also declare it. Our constitution allows you to get the exemption from vacating your seat
Right.
if you fail to declare that, or
Right.
fail to declare it in time. That is the issue, that exemption. It's not unique to us, but it is fairly unique. You don't have it in many other constitutions. I think I found it in Jamaica's constitution, and Cayman again followed it, I guess, because their constitution came 2 years after ours.
Okay.
So it's in theirs, and I found it in Jamaica's, yes. Now, the problem with remember I was telling you about how convoluted it was to read it? So you can enter into a contract through two ways: as yourself or your own business, you're self-employed, or you're individual, or you can be interested in that contract because you are a director of the company that entered into the contract.
Right.
If you think about it, you would know when you enter into a contract and it should trigger and says, oh, Jack, you know, I'm sitting in a house, this is actually a conflict. But you wouldn't know when a company you're the director or a shareholder or your family might be of. You don't know that. It takes a while before that realization comes to you. Because
I wouldn't know.
Right, because you're so far.
I am a director of Infinite Solutions, but I wouldn't know.
You wouldn't know.
Because I don't run the company.
Yes.
No, you don't run the company, but you're sitting in the house and
But it's not only
But
it's not
it
only
doesn't
directors.
come across my desk.
No, what I mean is it would be, I would say then it'll be the responsibility of the shareholders and directors
You're
of your
thinking-
company.
You're thinking small again.
No, it
You're
would be
thinking
the,
small.
I
If-
would have to then depend on my manager.
That's what I'm
Yes.
saying.
I'm
That's
sitting
what
in
I'm
the House
saying.
of Assembly.
That it would be, the onus would be on your company, meaning your shareholders, your directors, your managers, to inform you because they know you're sitting in the house.
If Infinite Solution if somebody raises an LPO for equipment from him and from Infinite Solutions, and he's on the beach because, you know, he's the founder.
I'm
They
in
gotta call me.
Mexico.
They gotta call me.
Not for,
Somewhere.
no. If
No, I'm
some-
saying my company has to call me to say I'm doing business with
Yeah.
government.
No, but you wouldn't know if this is it. If somebody calls and says that I need a photocopying machine, and do you have it in stock? Yes. And the next thing will be, all right, you see on your desk a LPO from government. A director of your company doesn't know that, but you have just entered a contract and you are a director and you're sitting in the House of Assembly and you don't know that.
Well, we're too small for that.
No, so, right, exactly. So
Meaning,
this is-
meaning, if my company is going to breathe on government, they need to call me.
You wouldn't know when it happens. Trust me, you wouldn't
No,
know when it
I
happens.
think,
So
because if you do that,
You agree or disagree?
if you do that, you will almost scare people that has businesses and know how to run businesses away from government.
Not really. I'm
Yeah.
just, no, not really. I'm just
course.
saying that for your sake, that, you know, there is transparency.
No problem with transparency.
And right, and to say that, you know, the government needs this, and they've contacted us. We know you're in the House of Assembly. We're just letting you know,
No.
so that no. Oh, okay. That's what I would do, and that's what I would direct my companies to
you're
do.
talking about a company that could perhaps have 15, 20 employees. They're not going to contact the House of Assembly person every time they get a telephone call. They might not even know it's government, and the LPO is right, just appears, and somebody shows up with
What
a
if
truck.
somebody called from
But
governor's office and say, I want 10 toners? Right? Do
I'm
you
just
have
saying
them
that
in
we're
stock?
small enough that
And then
we know.
they say, okay, 10 toners, but we can't release them without the LPO. So they go and they bring the LPO, bring it, give me my 10 toners. What should they do?
Well,
What-
what for example, what if there's an emergency and somebody's out on sea, something
Yeah, but then that's
sinks?
where you guys have to make not
Well, this is right. So
recommendations. I don't know if it's at the constitutional
Well, we
level,
did-
but
So what
in
is
the
the exemption?
legislation.
So what,
What is the
right.
exemption?
what I was trying to say, so the exemption makes, it deals with two categories of persons.
Okay.
It deals with the person who enters into that contract by himself or DBA, right? So you know. And then it also deals with the person who entered not by himself, but through
His company.
affiliation with another company through which he has some affiliation, whether as a
Okay.
director or partner or whatever, right? In which case the information might materialize or might never materialize. So this is why the exemption is split into two, because if you're in the first category, then the exemption says you're exempt if you disclose that contract before you actually entered into it or at the time, right? But it has to be contemporaneous to get the exemption. Now, there is an exemption if you disclose it as soon as possible after.
Right.
And that was meant for the category where you entered into it through another
Unknowingly.
right. So it takes some time for right. So it gives you a grace period. The
Is
exemption.
there a minimum in terms of the contract?
No, we recommended a minimum. That's one of our recommendations, right? Because
There
of
needs
what
to
Cindy
be
was getting at.
because simple things.
Yes, yes.
Our LPO, that's a contract. Our
Yes.
LPO is a contract, isn't it?
Yes.
No.
So this is why. So this is what the caller is getting at, the exemptions, to explain the exemption. So the exemptions were split into two different things with two different tests. However, it became muddled here where one test was being used.
Okay.
And that was not the correct interpretation. This is all discussed in the COI report
Right, right.
as well. But one exemption was being used across the board, which was that you get the exemption if you disclose it as soon as possible after. No distinction was being made between how you entered into that country, what was the conflict and how it arose.
Is there,
So we recommended, okay, this is actually a misinterpretation, but you know what? In a small jurisdiction, you need it both ways. And so we recommended a 45-day period for if you disclose it after, but we limit you to 45 days because you should know that you did it.
By then.
And then as soon as possible for everything else, if you entered it through any other
And what's
ways.
your minimum you recommend?
I think 10,000, but I think we just left it open. Was it 10,000? I think 10,000. We left it open really. I think we have square brackets around it because it's.
is there a recommendation in the Constitution, either the prior one or this one, or are you guys recommending that, you know, members of the House be able to have open exemptions to do business with government?
No. That would, to facilitate that is why that's why we suggested a threshold, because we realized that it's small. It's a small jurisdiction, and if you're going to get very strict with these declarations and down in the weeds like that, government could actually be denying itself, or the Constitution could be denying the government services. There's some services here that are only carried out by one person.
Yeah, that's totally understandable.
And
just
that one person
open.
might be in the House of Assembly.
And
If
we
not
call
now,
we
might
call
be in the
them we
future.
call them on the board, I said, single source suppliers.
Yes.
Well, when I say open open waivers to do business, and that's just not like for one of their businesses, that's just to do business with government. And I recall as you know, the new VIP government came in 2019, either 2 or 3 months in, they wanted to do something like that with one of their city members. Yeah.
Perhaps, I don't remember it.
Yeah.
But-
It was Kevin.
Yeah. It would make sense if it could be really strictly regulated, and it's sort of like if nothing has changed, just tick the box. Everything else remains the same. You don't have to file the forms all over again kind of
I
approach.
believe that there is enough in terms of a process
Yes,
for
yes,
declaring an interest
yes.
and exempting yourself from any discussion that is associated with
Yeah.
a contract of a certain
Yeah.
amount. And once those things are followed, and you can have a proper paper trail.
Yes. I think that's
to-
it. Transparency.
the transparency is
Transparency.
there, because if you don't do that for me, as
Things
a
get
businessman,
loose.
it
Things
just-
get loose.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just have one comment here, and then we're going to close off. I am giving guidance on the fishing rights protection under the Constitution. It can be found under First Nation fishing rights in Canada. Please research and discover.
Yes, that came up. That came up.
Oh, so
in
you've heard
the-
about this before?
Yeah, it came
Okay.
up on the. It's the same comment.
Okay.
But, and I think probably USVI as well, but the Canadian thing came up. But I think the difficulty is the person who requested this wanted it without a license, and they wanted
Okay.
it elevated to the level of the Constitution.
Right.
Yes, I think that's the challenge. I'm willing to, if the person wants to speak to me directly, he can contact you, and you can give him my number, and I'm willing to explain it. But that is, and we left in there verbatim the comment from the individual, so that,
Okay.
but it's the emphasis on without a license.
Okay.
The person didn't just want a right to fish and farm, they wanted to do it without a license.
Okay.
That's not going to happen in this. It's going to offend international laws to do with the sea and how you use the sea.
Okay.
This
So
is one of the
So I
problems
can't
of
go out on my boat
development.
and throw out a line.
No, you need a
Lord,
license.
have mercy, Jesus. It's a good thing you're a fisherman. I just want to catch a line or two.
Stay on the rock. Stay on the rock and
So I gotta
don't
tell
go
you-
out in your boat.
Let's take this final question from the public. Was anything recommended to change executive authority to be governor and the cabinet and not just governor in clause 46?
Maya, that sounds like your type of question.
We didn't recommend, but I think that's one that should
Have been?
actually. I think that that's not one of the recommendations, but I think that that should, that's something the government could take up. And again, just to remind the public that, please agitate your local,
Exactly.
your
Representatives.
representatives, because there is a process that follows this
Right.
before the Constitution. So, we had a lot of comments, but obviously, we still don't have a Constitution, and there's a process that will follow this. So, of course, use this opportunity to, refine what is already in the report and put any further comments to your elected representatives.
Okay. So we can put it
And I actually
to
think that's
the
a good
elected
one.
reps. Mhm.
Yeah.
So the
And who
commission
can
have
funnel
been
it,
disbanded?
then to the premier, and hopefully, if it's something that the premier likes and the negotiating team
fit in
feels to
there.
take on board. it
So the
could
process
be-
is far from
Through
over.
this process, we've actually had another recommendation from the panel,
Okay.
the four-person panel, which actually was in terms of junior ministers. We didn't get it, but a solution came from that panel that perhaps the way forward is parliamentary secretaries, revert to parliamentary secretaries.
Yes, yes.
Yeah. Because then they don't have the constraints, all the restrictions.
A
that come
parliamentary
with-
secretary and a permanent secretary, what's the difference?
So the parliamentary secretary is a person who is elected and assigned to assist the minister. So we had them in education. We had two of them, even they weren't referenced in the Constitution, but they're in other OT's Constitution. The only other
They're elected by
constitution-
who?
You, the public, they're members of the legislature. But instead of as being appointed as ministers, they're
A
given...
junior minister. Is
They're
it-
lower than a junior minister. Well, when I say lower, I mean they assist a minister, but unlike the junior minister, which I think is where somehow along the line we probably overlooked when they were doing the 2007 Constitution. I think the idea then was to get parliamentary secretaries like all the other OTs, but Bermuda has, except Bermuda, which has junior ministers. But somewhere along the line, it got transported from parliamentary secretaries to junior minister, and with that was thrown in restrictions similar to ministers being placed on junior ministers. So this is why you had, I was saying before, this is why you had the situation where your junior minister could not serve as the deputy speaker. Because they're treated as ministers, even though they don't sit in cabinet. But you don't have that with parliamentary secretaries. There
Well-
are some committees you can't have junior ministers on them because
Right.
it says that these committees you can't serve on them if you're a minister, and they apply that to junior ministers.
Right, we had that issue in the
Yes.
past year, correct. The person has gone on to say that that specific clause is what gives the governor unilateral control. So even if we ask that he consult, he can still say he is in charge and do whatever he wants. I'll just finish the comment to say we need to change this in this round, or we're still on the plantation. All right, I'll be fair and complete their
That's
their
why I have my,
statement.
Well, let me just say that I don't think that the governor has unilateral control. And of course, one of the recommendations is to remove the ouster clause in 46, subsection 6 of section 40 of the Constitution. So hopefully the consultation would be meaningful. Now, lawyers would like to tell you, even with the ouster clause, judicial review is there. Now, Cindy, you should know a lot about judicial review, but hopefully, because to be honest, all executive action is susceptible to review by the court. So the courts exercise a supervisory jurisdiction of judicial review. We don't necessarily have a very litigious community, it's becoming more so over my tenure as counsel in chambers. I've seen it become a lot more litigious, but certainly, you know, it's not that you don't have any recourse or that any individual, at least I would like to think that no individual in our government, including the governor, although there is, you know, an ouster clause in relation to the governor. So it's much more difficult to review something that the governor does, but it's certainly not the case that, you know, we cannot do it at
And
all.
if that clause is removed, you have
It would be
greater-
much easier. So at least the process. Now, judicial review is not for the court to usurp the
Right.
authority of either the government or the governor or any elected official,
It's
to be
review.
quite honest. It's just to review and to ensure that a fair and legal process was undertaken and that the decisions that are arrived at was reasonable and rational and things like that. So we do have a system that would hold the entire executive to account. That includes the elected ministers, public officials, you know, certain statutory functionaries like, let's say, Commissioner of Customs and the Chief of Immigration and so forth, to account for decisions that they make. So the court is there, and that's a big function of, you know, our system. So I hope that nobody thinks that any individual in our government has any sort of unilateral power to do what they want. And I will say that even though it's harder and that there is a different standard that would apply to the governor now, one of the recommendations is to remove that so that, you know, there's a more level, I should say, playing field where that is concerned.
Well, thank you, guys.
Can I just add, I know we're well over time, but you see, this is what I say, when people interact, this
Right.
is what gets the
Yeah.
conversation
And
flowing, right?
to be honest, I'm gonna listen to the public's feedback on this, and we may do another session.
Yes.
Based on how the public.
Yes, and then I think Dr. John was
Dr.
raising
John.
a question, but I'll answer it. But I just wanted to get this in there really, really, really quickly, following on what Maya said about the governor. We had a lot of comments comparing what Cayman does and what Bermuda and what everybody else does, and we must change ours to be like this or that. And in having reviewed a lot of those constitutions, let's put Bermuda aside, the others, a lot of times in their constitution, it says the governor shall consult with cabinet. And a lot, and more in ours, it says the governor shall consult with the premier. So we have to decide what we want. You know, it's not necessary that other people have a constitution that's better than us. In some cases, we have provisions that are more progressive, but we're not taking the time to appreciate them for what they are.
Okay.
So Dr. Klein was asking about
that you're a
if we've disbanded. So the situation right now is that it's in, I don't know what will happen. I gather that it might be debated, the report. But it's really now from here on in up to the premier. There's no secretariat as such at the moment functioning because there's been this lull.
Okay.
And so this is why we're encouraging persons to really reach out to your district person, because that might be more effective than sending something to the CRC, because there's nobody there really to have this process again of going through letters and having a body. The others have been really, their duty came to an end at the end of November once a report was handed in. Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you. This has come to an end. I thank you guys for tuning in. We're going to look at the reviews and the feedback on this, and we'll determine if there's a wrong too. I'm sure there's going to be, because me and myself, I'm going to go take up that thing. and make sure I get to the bottom of it. But thank you guys for tuning in. It's a new season of Cut Deep every Tuesday at 8. We're live on our Facebook page, our YouTube channel, and of course on 90.9 FM. We're going to say goodnight. Thank you, Dr. Bishop Klein.
Dr. Bishop. See, I get around these and I get upgraded.
I'm putting it all together.
Yes.
Thank you, Lisa, and thank you for Maya for taking the time to actually be here and be so willing to go over it and explain it and make sure people are comfortable and understand what's going on. Again, stay informed in this process. We're just beginning. We need to know that we are actually getting a document for the people and by the people. And like Maya has said, get in touch with your district reps, your representatives, the at-large ones as well. Express any changes or anything you would want to see go in or still come out or whatever. You still have the option to do that. So have a blessed night. Thank you guys for tuning in with us, and I will see you on Tuesday.